It began with something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that if I had not been paying attention, or rather, if I had not been attuned to the quiet rhythms of that kitchen and the woman who lived within them, I might have let it pass as nothing at all. A glance. That was it. Just the slow drift of her eyes across the room, lingering on me a fraction longer than politeness required, steady in a way that was not casual, not detached, not the innocent curiosity of a mother regarding her son's friend. No, this glance had a weight to it, a gravity I felt down to the marrow of my bones, as though something inside me had been waiting for exactly that kind of look to unlock it. I was sitting there at her kitchen island, hunched slightly over a chipped ceramic mug filled with lukewarm coffee, pretending to scroll idly through my phone, while my attention was in truth divided between the muted sound of the refrigerator humming and the awareness of her presence only a few feet away. The mug was familiar, chipped in the same spot it had been for years, the kind of imperfection that a household stops noticing. I pretended not to notice her eyes, but every nerve ending betrayed me. Alive with a restless energy I could neither explain nor control. When I finally lifted my gaze, expecting her to retreat into composure as she always had, expecting that look to vanish into the air like a shadow caught in the wrong light, I was surprised to find her holding steady. No flinch, no denial. Mrs. Hart, Elena, my best friend's mother, mid-40s, the kind of woman whose life had been marked by order and restraint, stood across from me with an expression that hinted at a fracture in the otherwise seamless armor of her composure. Recently divorced, perpetually dignified, the type of woman raised on the strict currency of boundaries, she was someone who rarely allowed her private self to spill into the open. And yet, in that charged moment, something raw flickered behind her gaze. I did not know what to call it then, curiosity, invitation, rebellion. But I knew it was not an accident. The silence between us was broken only when she shifted against the counter, one hand tracing the lip of a dish towel folded neatly beside her, before she spoke with a voice that tried for casual, but could not quite shed its edge. "Microwave's been broken all week," she said, the words deliberate, her tone carefully measured. She leaned slightly against the counter as if to soften them, yet there was a quiver beneath, a ripple that made the air taut. "You'd think I'd know how to fix it by now." The comment was simple, innocuous on its face, but something in her delivery carried more than the surface meaning. "I can take a look if you want," I offered, before reason had time to intervene, my body already pushing the chair back, my legs carrying me forward as if propelled by a force deeper than choice. The chipped mug, the phone, the pretense of distraction, all abandoned. She smirked, not quite agreement, not quite refusal, the curve of her lips shaped into something ambiguous enough to keep me teetering. It wasn't just about the microwave. I knew it. She knew it, though neither of us dared to speak the truth aloud. "You know how to handle things like that?" she asked, the words simple yet sharp, the cadence laced with implication. The moment they landed, I felt the electric thread woven through them. She wasn't really asking about circuitry or appliances. Her question was a veil, and I understood it instinctively, viscerally, even before my mind caught up. Every nerve lit at once, body trembling with the recognition of something I had no language for. Still, I crouched before the stubborn appliance, the worn buttons and the faint crack along its edge, pretending to study it while my heart hammered wildly, as though fixing it might prove me capable of something larger. Behind me, the soft shift of her footsteps closed the space, and I could feel her presence settling in the air like heat radiating off a nearby flame. There was no music playing in the house, no television to mask the quiet, just the slow breathing of the old walls and the thunder of my pulse echoing in my ears. Elena had always been kind to me, always polite, occasionally warm in ways that made her more approachable than most parents. But never, until that moment, had she allowed the distance between us to collapse so openly. When her hand brushed my shoulder as she reached for the drawer above, it could have been an accident. Maybe it was. But the hesitation, the way her fingers grazed instead of simply moving past, suggested otherwise. I forced myself not to turn immediately, not to let her see the rush of blood across my face or the way my chest seized at her nearness. Because I knew. I knew if I met her eyes and found what I suspected reflected back at me, the fragile balance we had been pretending to keep would shatter instantly. Still, inevitability is a cruel force, and when I did glance over my shoulder, she was already watching me. Her eyes, dark, steady, searching, did not flicker away. There was no apology for the accidental touch, no excuse hovering on her lips. Only the steady intensity of a woman who had crossed some invisible threshold, and in doing so, dragged me across with her. "Your mom said you were good with your hands," she said, her voice low, threaded with that teasing edge that made my breath falter. The words seemed innocent enough, but her tone stripped them of any neutrality. Each syllable felt like a test, a line drawn on the floor between us. "She say that?" I replied, feigning casualness I did not feel, every muscle tense, every thought unraveling. Elena's laugh came soft, small, almost reluctant, but edged with something sharper. "She did," she said, though the amusement faded quickly, replaced by a deeper shadow that slipped into her eyes. Her smile faltered, revealing something weightier beneath, and with that subtle shift, the air in the kitchen tightened again. It wasn't about a broken appliance or casual banter. It was about everything she was carrying: exhaustion, loneliness, the weight of years pressed into her skin until it threatened to split. I rose from my crouch, the microwave long forgotten, and found myself standing close enough that silence became the loudest presence in the room. She looked at me, and though neither of us spoke, the heaviness between us was undeniable. "You okay?" I asked finally, my voice rougher than I intended, the words slipping out without permission. She hesitated, as though weighing how much of herself she was willing to reveal, and then finally said, "Yeah, just tired." The simplicity of it cracked like glass. She wasn't talking about sleep or a long day. The way she said it told me this was a fatigue of the spirit, a weariness carried too long, the exhaustion of pretending life was intact when it was quietly unraveling beneath her. "I get that," I told her, and I meant it more deeply than I expected, because I had been pretending too, pretending not to notice the subtle way her expression softened when her eyes landed on me, pretending my lingering visits had nothing to do with her presence, pretending I didn't hear her voice echo inside my thoughts long after I left. I lived in a quiet performance of normalcy, but in that moment, the mask threatened to crumble. The silence returned, not awkward this time, but alive, charged like a held breath. It felt as though the room itself was waiting for something to happen, for one of us to step closer, to break through the tension that had been building invisibly over countless small moments until it became impossible to ignore. My lips parted, my body leaning toward confession, toward the kind of truth that once spoken cannot be undone. But just as the words hovered at the edge of my tongue, the sharp ring of the doorbell cut through, shrill and insistent, shattering the fragile spell. Elena's gaze locked with mine in the startled silence that followed, and for a fraction of a second, there was something unguarded in her eyes, something that felt dangerously close to permission. We didn't move. Neither of us did. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, like the outside world demanding its claim. Her exhale came soft, long, reluctant, before she finally broke from the moment, her body turning toward the hallway. I stayed rooted, heart pounding, the heat of her nearness still clinging to my skin like the residue of a flame. I heard the door open, heard the muffled voice of a neighbor asking about trash bins blown into the street, the kind of small, meaningless interaction that suddenly felt absurd against the storm still rolling through my chest. When she returned, her face had reset, composed again, the curtains drawn, as though she had simply shut away the dangerous part of herself. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel she didn't need. That was weird. "No," I answered too quickly, the word leaping from my mouth like a defense. "You don't have to." "It was," she interrupted, her voice clipped. "Final. Let's just leave it there." But her eyes, when I caught them again, betrayed her words. They were tired, yes, but also hollow in a way that frightened me. Hollow like a woman who had spent years holding everyone else together while quietly unraveling in the dark. I sank back into the chair at the island, fingers still curled tight around the forgotten mug, unsure whether to run from the suffocating silence or stay and pierce it with something real. My chest ached with words unsaid. "You're not just my best friend's mother anymore. I think about you when I shouldn't," but none of them left my lips. She poured herself a glass of water and left it untouched, her hand wrapped around it like an anchor she couldn't quite let go. "You know," she said suddenly, her voice softer now, tinged with the weight of memory. "I married Mark when I was 24, barely knew who I was back then. I just wanted out of my parents' house, and he seemed like the quickest way out." I stayed silent, sensing that she wasn't inviting commentary but confession. "We made it 19 years, she went on, a crooked smile twisting her lips. "That's what people call a success, right? 19 years. But somewhere halfway through, I stopped recognizing myself." Her words settled heavily between us, and I nodded slowly. "Were you happy?" I asked carefully. Her eyes found mine then, and the answer was already written there, raw and unguarded, long before her lips formed the words. "I tried to be." Her admission hung in the air, a fragile confession that seemed to ripple through the quiet house and land between us with a weight neither of us could ignore. I tried to be. The words weren't bitter, not sharp or angry, but instead spoke of a kind of resignation, a sadness worn smooth over time, like a stone carried in the pocket for years until it loses all its edges. Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer before drifting downward, as though the floorboards might offer an easier truth than the one reflected back at her. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I had the right to. Instead, I just breathed in the silence, feeling the unspoken intimacy of her vulnerability and the way it pulled me deeper into her orbit. I thought of my own relationships, or more accurately, the absence of one. My last breakup had been quiet, almost uneventful. Two people drifting apart with more apathy than anger, more silence than shouting. 6 months had passed since then, months in which I told myself I was fine, told friends that I didn't care, convinced myself I was better off. And yet, in this kitchen, standing in the magnetic pull of Elena's presence, I realized how numb I had been all that time. I hadn't felt much of anything until now, until this. She looked at me with eyes that saw too much, and the thought struck me. She wasn't just looking at me, she was seeing me. Not the boy who came over for video games and late-night pizza with her son, not the kid who hung around the house, but something closer to the man I wanted to be, though I wasn't sure if I deserved that recognition. "You're not a kid," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the stillness, her gaze unwavering. "But you're not supposed to be here either." I didn't know if she meant the kitchen, the house, or this precarious space between us, this emotional fault line we had been tiptoeing across without acknowledging the danger of the drop. "I'm not trying to push anything," I said quickly, the words rushing out before I could consider them. "But don't pretend like I imagined it." Her eyes locked with mine, holding them, no escape in their steady darkness. "No, you didn't." The air seemed to tilt, the balance shifting in that instant as though the floor itself recognized the truth and adjusted beneath us. Too real now, too undeniable to retreat into the safety of denial. I felt my chest constrict, heart rattling against my ribs as she stepped closer. Not fully, not boldly, but with the hesitance of someone testing ice that might splinter beneath her weight. Her hand brushed the counter near mine, not quite touching, but near enough that the electricity of proximity hummed in the air like a low current. "I shouldn't feel this," she whispered, almost as if the words were meant for herself rather than for me. "Not with you." Yet she didn't move away, didn't reclaim the space she had given up. And I didn't either. The moment stretched out, taut and trembling, a suspended chord of music that could resolve into something beautiful or collapse into dissonance. No one touched, no one spoke, but something irreversible had shifted all the same. Outside, the wind picked up, the branches of the old oak brushing against the window. A dry leaf slapped against the glass, startling in its intrusion. Inside, the silence deepened, every second amplifying the echo of our hearts, until the sound of the front door creaking open sliced through the moment like a blade. Footsteps, familiar ones. "Yo, where you at?" a voice called, casual and careless. But for me, it landed like an earthquake. Brandon, my best friend. Her son. I froze, my blood turning cold in an instant as Elena's hand jerked back, retreating as though burned. Her entire expression rearranged itself with practiced precision, a calm mask sliding into place, though the rapid rise of her chest betrayed her. "In the kitchen," she called back, her voice steady, too steady, the kind of steadiness that only came when someone was desperately holding themselves together. I sat up straighter at the island, guilt clawing hot and merciless up my neck, my pulse deafening as the space between us vibrated with the residue of what had just almost happened. Brandon appeared in the doorway, a grin tugging at his face, his phone still in hand. "Man, I forgot my charger again," he said, his voice easy, teasing. "You're still here?" His tone was playful, innocent, without suspicion, but his words landed heavy all the same. "Yeah," I said, fumbling for normalcy. "Was helping your mom with the microwave." He smirked, eyebrows lifting in mock surprise. "What? Fixing broken appliances now? Didn't know you were domestic." I forced a laugh, though it came out wrong, brittle at the edges. Elena chuckled too, though hers didn't ring true either, her gaze carefully avoiding both of ours. Brandon grabbed the charger from the counter, his easy grin still in place. "You good?" he asked his mom, glancing at her briefly. "Fine," she replied too quickly, too firmly. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but he let it slide. "Cool, I'm heading out. Don't do anything weird." He pointed at the two of us playfully, the joke harmless in his mind, a dagger in mine. The door slammed shut behind him, his footsteps fading into the outside world, leaving behind a silence that was anything but empty. The weight of his words lingered like smoke, choking, suffocating. "That can't happen again," Elena said finally, her voice low, almost breaking. "What can't?" I asked, though I knew. "You know what?" I stepped closer anyway, reckless, unwilling to let the boundary she was trying to rebuild close so easily. But it did, and you didn't stop it. Her eyes flashed, torn between longing and terror, between desire and the unyielding walls of duty and history. "He's your friend," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm his mother. I know you're young." "I'm not a kid," I said firmly, the words cutting sharper than I intended. She looked away, her breath trembling. "You think this is just about age? It's not. It's history. It's boundaries. It's God. It's messy." "I don't care." "You should." Her voice cracked on the last word, breaking like a dam straining against too much water. She turned toward the sink, gripping the edge of the counter as though it were the only thing tethering her to the ground. I stepped behind her, close enough that I could feel the gravity of her body, the heat radiating though I didn't touch. My voice dropped. softer now, like speaking too loudly would shatter her. "I think about you," I said, every syllable deliberate, my throat raw. More than I should. I replay moments in my head that probably didn't mean anything to you, but they did to me. She didn't move. The silence stretched, pressing down heavy, before she finally turned to face me again. Her eyes searched mine desperately, fear and hunger wrestling behind them, and for a moment I thought she might give in completely. Her hand lifted, hovered near my chest, trembling with the possibility of touch, with the possibility of undoing everything. Then the sharp buzz of her phone cut through, loud in the stillness, startling us both. She flinched, grabbed it from the counter quickly, her eyes flicking down to the screen. Whatever she saw drained the color from her face. "Mark," she muttered. "Your ex?" She nodded, thumb hesitating over the glowing screen. "He's coming by. Wants to talk." My pulse spiked, a drumbeat in my ears. "When?" Her voice was barely audible. 10 minutes. The words hit like a countdown, like a fuse sparking toward detonation. I stared at her, wanting to say something that could steady the world, something that could clear the air and make sense of the chaos. But the look on her face told me no words could change what was coming. "You should go," she whispered. Though even as she said it, neither of us moved. Our eyes locked, the unspoken truth surging between us, undeniable. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I stood at the threshold of her kitchen, keys in hand, frozen in the in-between. Elena hadn't looked at me again since she'd told me to leave. Her jaw was clenched tight, her thumb still trembling over her phone like it was a detonator, and maybe it was. Her ex-husband was minutes away, and I was still standing there, caught in the gravitational pull of something neither of us could walk away from. The night unraveled into a silence that seemed almost alive, stretching itself across the room and pressing down on me with a weight I could neither escape nor explain. As I stepped out into the cool air, I felt as though I had left something vital behind, something that refused to detach from me no matter how far I walked. The distant hum of the streetlights and the occasional rustle of leaves were the only companions to my racing thoughts. Every moment in that kitchen replayed itself in relentless loops, her eyes holding mine with unspoken truths, the tremor in her voice when she admitted what neither of us should have felt, the shattering intrusion of Brandon's presence, and the chilling finality of Mark's return. Yet beneath the chaos, a fragile thread bound us, pulling taut, reminding me that this story wasn't finished. Whether it was a mistake, a temptation, or something deeper, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I was already too far gone to turn back.